Appreciate the opportunity here. We really have a special treat for you today. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Trusko now, probably close to a year, a little over a year, I think, and really an extraordinary individual. He is a true polymath. I'm an aspiring one, but he's a true one, and so I look up to him in that regard. He is the president or CEO of the International Association of Innovation Professionals. He founded this organization. So to give you some background, his bachelor's of science degrees in biology, he's got a BS in accounting, an MBA in marketing, and PhDs in computer science and business. So he started and sold 6 companies. He's led major efforts at major consulting firms as a managing director. He's written chapters and in at least a dozen books and a dozen books. He also was a co-editor, I believe, on the Global Innovation Science Handbook, which is the body of knowledge for the International Association of Innovation Professionals and the professional accreditation or certification in innovation. He's held professorships at Texas A&M, New York University, University of Minnesota, the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, Mayo Clinic. I mean, the list goes on. So he's working right now building a startup company called propertyintel.com, which is kind of a Carfax for homes. So this is about ready to be released. So Brett is extremely busy. We appreciate his leadership. He's leading 4,000 people globally in the innovation space and driving ISO standards for innovation around the world. So let me turn it over to Brett.
Thank you, Dale. And I'm gonna have a little fun today because there's an interesting thing going on that I don't think most people even realize. And I think this is, this happens with all kind of great changes in the way we do things. I speak off the cuff. I don't have anything written, so you're not going to see me looking down because I just don't do that. So every now and then I'll make a mistake or stutter a little bit or something, but that's just the way it is. Anyways, I'm talking a little bit about the status of global innovation, and it may not be what you think. One of the things that I'm observing, being connected with as many innovation professionals as I'm connected with, is during COVID, and this is the surprising thing to me, since COVID has hit, a lot of these innovation departments are being folded, and a lot of innovation managers and professionals are actually losing their job. Now, why I think that's counterintuitive is because when we've got a crisis and everything's changing is precisely the time when we need to bring the innovators out to say, how do we change the way we do our business? How do we change our revenue models? All this kind of stuff. We see it going on, but there's a lot of organizations where they're letting those people go. So now the question is, I guess I got to manually move it. There we go. I think it'll work now. So there's an epic battle for the soul of innovation going on. I don't know what this is. This apparently some guy photoshopped his friends into his bachelor party or something. But I thought it was kind of cute because it's a battle. There's a bunch of guys in suits and they've got, funny little things and all that kind of stuff. And the battle that's going on that I'm seeing right now is between 2 types of innovators. And so the first one, and you guys will remember this. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. If you can't hear it, let me know and I'll.
Yo, Mars Blackman here with my main man, Michael Jordan. Yo, Mike, what makes you the best player in the universe? Is it the vicious stunts?
No, Mars.
Is it the haircut?
No, Mars.
Is it the shoes?
No, Mars.
Is it the extra long shorts?
No, Mars.
Is the shoes it, right?
Nah.
Is it the short socks?
No, Mars.
Money's gotta be the shoes. Shoes, 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 shoes. You sure it's not the shoes?
For sure, Mars.
What about the shoes?
No, Mars.
Money's gotta be the shoes.
Okay, I hope everybody remembers that commercial. That was a fun commercial that played, I think, in the early 90s, if I recall. So what do we have going on here? Well, it's got to be the shoes, right? When we're talking about innovation. If you have an innovation center, you have a foosball table. Look at these, how Allbirds became Silicon Valley's favorite sneaker. Mark Zuckerberg to Jack Dorsey, how Silicon Valley becomes an innovation or a trend. what to buy to look like a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. All these are about the shoes, by the way. They're the Allbirds shoes. To fit into Silicon Valley, wear these wool shoes. How Silicon Valley darling Allbird became a footwear phenomenon. To fit into Silicon Valley, wear these shoes. I guess that's a different article. And those are Allbirds. So guess what? If you buy Allbird shoes, you too can be an innovator. Kind of like the foosball table and the innovation lab and all the other kind of things that they do when they kind of set those innovators aside and put them in a glass bowl and say, these are special people because they're creative, not like the rest of us, mere mortals. So on the one side, we have a lot of those. And you guys, for anybody who's heard me talk before, I like to say that if you go into LinkedIn and you look for people who have innovation in their title, there's more of them than accountants. So apparently we have way more innovation people than we do accountants. But if you look around at your local universities, there's not really many of them that actually have a degree in innovation. So all these people came from somewhere. And I would argue that, you know, if all I have to do is buy the shoes and become an innovation expert, then why not buy the shoes? I have 2 pairs of these, by the way. They're amazing shoes, but they don't make me an innovator, right? Now let's look at the other side of the debate. And you guys, you know, once again, you're hopefully that none of you are on the call that don't remember the Revenge of the Nerds, right? And those are the people, I hate to tell you this, Dale, but those are the people like me and Dale and a bunch of the other people like us who are saying, well, you know, we've been around long enough and we know that it's more than just buying the shoes. It's more than just building the innovation lab. So a lot of it is process and conformance. So this is the other side of the equation. And I'm not saying that one side is right and one side is wrong. I'm saying actually that both sides are needed. And so we have this new innovation standard that's being developed. I'm the secretariat for the United States delegation to ISO, called ISO 56000. You might also hear it referred to as ISO 279, which is the innovation management standard, innovation management system standard that's being developed by ISO. It's now been adopted as a work product at ISO 56001, which means, for those of you that don't really know about ISO that much, what we typically do in ISO is we write 2 first, and that's the kind of the overall structure of what it looks like. And then we write 3, 4, 5, 6, as many as necessary to carve out specialized pieces of it. Then we write the 000, and that's typically a terms and vocabulary. And then if everybody votes on it, you get to 56,000 or a 001. So if you are familiar with ISO 9001, that's the auditable standard. And that's the one that organizations are audited. So the 2 is the conformance, and it tells you what to do. The 1 is the standard that says you do this. So you've been audited, you've proven that you can do it. So why this is important is because as someone at the GSA, the US GSA told me, they said, you know, we're now being told that we have to put a question about innovation in our request for proposal. Well, if somebody responds and says, we have 2 patents, that's great if you're a couple of people working in your garage. If you're IBM, that's terrible. So we don't have an objective measure, and this is why eventually this is going to be something important. And what this is going to eventually require is that we're going to have to certify innovators. There's several companies out there that do certifications in innovation. We will be the only ones doing ISO 56000 because we're the only professional association that's actually involved in the development of this standard. It requires some academic rigor because, you know, we know, and this is one of the things that I find always kind of interesting, is if you had a company and you created a department of wishful thinking, and a few years later, they had a few wishes, but they didn't accomplish anything. How is that any different than a lot of innovation departments? You know, you've got to have measurements and standards, and you've got to have things that you work toward to prove that you're actually being successful. And this is one of the reasons that I think a lot of these innovation people and these innovation departments are being closed up during this crisis, this COVID crisis, is because they haven't proved their worth. They haven't shown that they are really valuable. And 9 times out of 10, when I talk to these people whose departments have folded up, I ask them if they had a portfolio. And if you think about a stock portfolio, for those of you that know this stuff, you try to balance the this industry against that industry. You have betas, and you try to say, if this one goes up, this one goes down, so that you're protecting your portfolio. It's the same thing in innovation. You need short-term wins, maybe smaller dollar, the big deal that you're working on, but you need all these things working in harmony. And most of the time, these people don't have it because, you know, they just bought the shoes. And when they bought the shoes, they figured they'd have innovation and they didn't have to apply any rigor to it. However, you know, if the government starts requiring that you start demonstrating that you're competent in innovation, and large companies start demonstrating it, then the side with the nerds is at a distinct advantage. The only problem, of course, is you also need the people with the shoes. And so we all got to get together and quit fighting with each other. And some of the reasons that, the nerd side gets in trouble is because standards are perceived as contradictory to innovation. They go like, well, you can't put, you know, a fence around innovation. It has to run wild. You can't put it in a cage. It's got to fly free. And to a certain extent, yeah, that's okay. But at the same time, you've got to be able to kind of keep it a little bit under control, or otherwise you've just got that department with a bunch of people partying all day and the rest of the organization being resentful that they get better furniture and better computers and better lunch, but they don't actually produce anything. And some of the reasons you need these things is, if you think about it, intellectual property rights policies should be standardized. Absolutely. Who would argue with that? Tools and techniques should be standardized. We should all be doing the right tools at the right time in the right way, not just inventing stuff on the fly as far as tools and techniques go. If we're doing open innovation or we've got partners, we really have to have partners that are speaking the same language as us, that are doing things in the same way, that are in agreement with us. Because if we have a partnership going on and one group speaking Chinese and the other group speaking Arabic and the other group speaking English, then we're not going to get anywhere. So we have to be able to agree on terms and terminologies. And the other important thing is standards tend to promote professionalism. You can't have a profession if you don't have a body of knowledge and some sort of a standard that demonstrates that you know something. So the way we look at it, and we've done this since day one, is we see, and I thank you, Dale, for mentioning polymath. I think the best innovators are the ones that are the most broad, have the most broad experience in the world. And I say that because if you look at my background, I've got, you know, 2 business degrees. So I sit in this business space. Is this going to work? Oh, this business space right here by some of my training. And then by my science training, I sit in this space here. And then I'll cheat a little bit and say, because I have some marketing training, I also sit a little bit in here. So when you think of the business stuff, you know, those are your accountants, your marketers, your process people, you know, everything that goes into business. On the social science side, that could be your designers, your ethnographers, people who understand people and what they like and how they do it. And then on the engineering side, well, pretty much if we're making any kind of a widget or something solid, we need an engineer to come forward and say, you know, this is how you build this, and this is the stress tolerances and that kind of stuff. So let's just take a look at this. And, you know, at point B, we might say, well, you know, that's somebody that they've only had business training. And I like to tell the joke that, you know, if you've ever been an engineer and the business person's come in and said they got a great idea, let's build a bridge between New York and London so that next time the volcanoes in Greenland erupt, the air flights don't get interrupted. The engineer will say, that's impossible. You have no idea. It's an engineering impossibility. And the business person says, well, you must not be a very good engineer, because they don't even know the basics of engineering, right? On, say, point C, that might be, say, your social worker, who doesn't really care what it costs and doesn't really care what it takes to deliver it. They just want to take care of the people. They want to make sure they're taken care of, they're healthy, they're happy, they're safe, they're educated. And then down at like point G, you know, that's the engineer that comes into the business person's office and says, I just invented the greatest laptop in the world. The business person looks at it and says, this thing will cost $70,000 to manufacture. And the engineer says, if you were a good business person, you'd figure it out, because they don't know the basics of engineering. And then you've got all these points in between where, you know, you could have somebody in business and social sciences that might be, you know, I don't know, running a charity or something. You could sit there at point F, and that could be somebody that, that's been, got a bachelor's in engineering, a master's in business administration. So they kind of know both of those. And then I didn't put one between engineering and social science, but that could be like an architect who's thinking about design and thinking about the stresses and the materials you have to use and that kind of stuff. But let's face it, if you really want to be the best engineer, you've got to sit here in this sweet spot where you know a little bit about all these things. So when you're asked the question, we need to build this new thing, you say, well, I know enough about engineering, I know enough about design, and I know enough about business that I can say this is a winner. Because if I don't, then I'm going to drift into one of those spots and I'm not going to be nearly as effective. Now, the good news is you don't personally have to sit in that sweet spot, but you should have a team that has somebody sitting in all those spots that you communicate well with, so you guys can all get along and work it out. Now, going to the R&D and the COVID, we can see that R&D was actually dropping off prior to COVID hitting. This is actually our R&D investments. And so when you actually look at what was happening immediately prior to COVID, right in this space, R&D in the United States was dropping off anyways. We have not been supporting R&D. I think that that's a little bit of, I think it's a little deceptive. And the reason I think it's a little deceptive is because I've seen a trend, especially in this innovation space and technology, where more of the large companies are just letting small companies innovate, and then they're acquiring them. So they're acquiring their innovation capabilities instead of developing them from a homegrown thing. The problem is there's not enough ways that these large companies are supporting these small companies to help them along. They really should be involved earlier. And I think a lot of these large companies have venture funds that they're starting to develop, which might address that. The outlook for 2021, this is probably wrong because I don't think we're going to be back to real life until probably third quarter. Definitely fourth quarter will be back to normal. Third quarter, I think we'll be revving the economy back up again and getting the engines going. But even so, on GDP growth, the United States, it doesn't even keep up with the industrialized nations right now. We're at about 3% GDP growth, and the average for the industrialized advanced economies are about 3.9 or 4%. So we've been falling behind in R&D. Granted, we've been doing a lot of stuff in innovation and acquiring innovation, but I think we're not really doing what we need to do to keep up. So the fact is, we don't really know the future. So when we go into not knowing anything in doubt, I always go to a Johari window and say, why is it that I don't know what's going on? And probably everybody here knows about that. Donald Rumsfeld made it famous, even though it was invented in 1955 by some other folks. And so if you look at this, right now, innovation in many respects sits in quadrant D here. And sitting in quadrant D means basically, well, don't bother us because we got the shoes, and yeah, we don't know what we're doing, and we don't know exactly. Oops, sorry about that. Did you lose my screen or you still got it? Good. I messed up on one of my monitors, sorry. So we sit in quadrant D in most innovation centers where we say, well, we don't know what we're going to make, we're going to invent, and we don't know when it's going to be here, but trust us, it's going to happen. It's going to be great. We're going to save the company. We're going to make $1 billion. Well, I don't know. I'm not banking on that if I'm the manager of the company. Maybe if I'm running the innovation center, I'll do that. But if I'm actually running the company, I'm saying, no, that's not acceptable. I need numbers, I need projections, and I need you to demonstrate that this is actually happening. So you've taken the shoe people and you're saying, now you got to apply this rigor. You got to work with the nerds to apply the rigor, the standards, the methodologies. We do know in innovation, heterogeneous teams are better than homogeneous teams. And that's where with the 3 circles, I said, we need somebody from all those spots. Ideally, if you have some knowledge of every one of those things, that's great. And Dale, don't you say that you're not a polymath, because you read probably more books than anybody I know in the world. So, getting that exposure and reading lots of books and being interested and curious, we all hear about that from innovation people. And it's so true, because you've got to have a bigger perspective on the world. covering most of the quadrants. The more people involved, the better. So, if you recall with the Johari window, what's known to others and what's known by me. That's the easy stuff. That's not really innovation because I know it, you know it, everybody knows it. What's sad is when I don't know it, but everybody else knows it. And there are people that know things about me that I don't even know about myself. If I can get them on the team, then we all get along and we can, work through problems. Or even just using the example of a problem that I don't know, but others do know. That would be like your early, your lead users who are actually using your product for something that you're not using it for because you don't even know as a company that this is something that it can be used for. The snowboards, when they took the wheels off skateboards and started snowboarding, the skateboard companies had no idea that they also made snowboards. And then the hidden things that are known to myself, but others don't know. So if you look at a company, those are our secrets that we know about. Maybe there are trade secrets and stuff, but the rest of the world doesn't know about. If you put a team together, especially like an open innovation team, then now we can start sharing our secrets with other people and stuff. And thank goodness we're using a standard. We have the rules of working together where those secrets don't get out. And maybe another company's better exploiting the inventions that we've come up with. And then, of course, the unknown to self and unknown to others. So I just kind of threw those quadrants over there. I don't want to go too far and go over time. So to give you a little bit more of an idea of what you can do with this, we do have ISO 56000, 56002, 3, 4, 5. If you're involved with NOC AD, they purchased a few of those copies of those. So if you contact Jerry Walls, he can share those with you if you want to see what's in them. I'm sure Dale can help you figure that out too. But it is going to be a standard and it's going to be required at some point. You're going to have to, if you're a large organization, especially if you're doing business with the government, it's likely that you'll have to be accredited at some point. If anybody gets turned on by developing standards, you are welcome to come in. We need the help. The thing I tell people about standards is we have all the best meetings in all the best places. So you go to Paris and you spend 5 days, 8 hours a day in the most boring thing in the world, which is developing standards. But then every night they plan something really cool and you run around Paris or Madrid or London or Tokyo. So, that's the upside of it. If your employer will pay for you to go to those meetings, they're great vacations. Get certified or start thinking about what you need to know to cover in the body of knowledge so you can just be a better innovator. We're always looking for people who have knowledge because we actually follow the ISO standard as a certifying body. We're accredited as a certifying body, which other people aren't, which means it's a slow, painful effort of bureaucracy, working groups, and votes. Supporting the effort to develop legitimate innovation standards. They are important. Like I told you, we need to bring the shoes people and the nerds people together. Former join a chapter. Dale would love to start some sort of a chapter down there. We have state chapters in different places. We have student chapters. The student chapters are neat because one of the things the student chapters try to do is they get to practice innovation while they're still students. So they'll actually go to, say, a nonprofit, a local nonprofit, and help them innovate their way through problems as a public service kind of a thing. And I think that's great for the community. It's great for the organization. It's great for the students. It's great for the nonprofits that get to get helped with things. And ask your local university to form a chapter. So I like to make sure that we finish with something fun. And that is that I am convinced, and I've been doing, I do a podcast too, although I've got a few things in the podcast that need to be edited before I get them online. But I'm of the opinion that if you look back in time, when really bad things happen, or we're under a lot of stress and strain and stuff like that, that's when we get the best innovations. That's when we get the best people thinking, because they go through things and they innovate through hard times. And so if you look at what happened after the Dark Ages, well, after the Dark Ages, we had the Renaissance. And look at everything that happened in the Renaissance. I mean, that's where you really came up with the polymath, or some people call them the Renaissance, we'll say person. You know, the person, if you think about some of these Renaissance celebrities, you know, they did language and music and art and engineering. They had a lot of interest and did a lot of things. This is, I think, the direction that we have to go, because none of us can be a real expert at anything anymore, because, you know, I mean, you couldn't go through an entire library in your lifetime. More information is being invented in the 20 minutes that we've been on the phone or on this call than you know, a lifetime 1,000 years ago. So so we got that out of the Renaissance. Out of the last pandemic, this is a terrible picture. I couldn't find a better one, but this is from The Great Gatsby. This one here. And what did we have after the 1918 pandemic? We had the Roaring 20s. We might have another Roaring 20s, guys. We might have a lot of fun the rest of this century or the rest of this decade. I'm hoping, you know, we might be really productive, have a heck of a lot of fun, and just, you know, really go do a lot of great stuff. Now, never mind that it led to a depression because, you know, maybe we partied a little too hard, but then after, you know, World War II, we saw some of the greatest expansion in prosperity, not just in the US, but all over the world. You know, the World War II really kind of made us appreciate what we had again. And so, it was a bright light at the end of a dark time. And then at the end of the Cold War, you know, I didn't really have anything there, but look at all the inventions, the innovations that the Cold War gave us. Things that changed our lives. I read an article the other day that was talking about GPS and how we're trying to invent a new GPS system because it's a bit vulnerable. But if you look at GPS and all the things it's enabled in our life that came out of the Cold War, it's amazing. We couldn't live without GPS. I don't think most people know that GPS may be a more important innovation than almost anything else we came up with over the last 40 years. So we got a lot to look forward to. And whether you're one of the shoes people, the cool kids, or the nerds, we all get together, we innovate, and we make this a really great rest of the decade after we get through COVID. So apparently I can answer questions if anybody has any.
Brett, we have one here. Besides shoes, if you had to pick one thing that attracts people to want to be part of an innovation community or effort, what would that be?
Well, I know that one of the reasons I started the association is because, you know, with all due respect to people my age on the phone, people my age, sometimes they get a bit stuck in a rut and they're not necessarily as fun. So I said, you know what, I want to hang out with cool, young, innovative people when I'm 90 years old. And the only way to do that is to start my own organization so that we can have conferences and I can know a lot of 25, 30, 35-year-olds that are thinking great thoughts and doing great things. So, you know, the innovation stuff can be actually a ton of fun for people who've then been through innovation workshops and stuff. It's fun. And Sybil said that she was on the conference we did this fall for the military. And we did some fun stuff. I mean, at one point I had fun because we filmed a little thing where we were coming to the conference and I was on a boat and my wife she just loved it because I had a green screen behind me and I was supposed to be on a boat. So I'm on a boat and I got a captain's hat on. She throws a bucket of water on me. You know, you're given the ability to have a little bit of fun in your life. You know, you have to know, just like anything, you can't just have dessert, but the dessert's great. You also have to have some vegetables and some meat and all that kind of stuff. But the desserts are great in innovation. So.
Okay, we had one question from Key Abel. How do you keep the innovation community from growing legs and becoming unmanageable?
Well, I think that it's already unmanageable. And I see that I'm not going to disparage any other organizations, but you know, there's people that, there's a lot of folks that do innovation stuff and all they do is pitch contests. I judge a lot of pitch contests, or they go on tours of innovation labs and then they drink and that's all they do. And what we're trying to do is put a little bit of discipline in this. I go back to when I was a partner at KPMG, I had global responsibility for all things business process reengineering. Six Sigma and stuff. That was very disciplined. We didn't have a lot of fun. But at the same time, there was nobody that was trying to standardize Six Sigma. There's no standard for Six Sigma. You think about that, that's kind of interesting because everybody's supposed to follow the same formula. But what happened, it was a bit too wild and woolly. Nobody pulled it together. And so now Six Sigma, kind of people laugh about it. Oh, we tried that. It didn't work. It didn't work because you didn't follow the process. So we have to put the process in place if we want innovation to work over the long term. If we don't put the process in place, it's likely to just, spin out of control and everybody will say, did that, tried it, didn't work, and move on to something else.
Great. Awesome. Well, I think that's probably it for time wise, Brett. Really, really appreciate your insights and your global perspective, your background. Just outstanding.
Well, thank you, Dale.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, I'm going to hang out. So if anybody wants to send anything to me on the chat, I'll answer it.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.